growing up, like with my family specifically, my parents were able to afford a house before I was born. They purchased that. My dad was 27 when he had me. I'm 3 years apart from that. I can't imagine within 3 years of me being able to have a house and then also a little kid too running around. That's something that like I thought about.
Colby.
A little Colby running around. That's not something I think that'll happen within like the immediate future. Welcome back to the Real Estate Rundown. I am your host for today, Colby, the content producer at Zoodealio, and I'm here with Kayla Leos.
Hi, Colby.
So as you guys can tell, obviously we don't have the rest of the regular four here, but what we have today is a little bit more of an introspective podcast, something coming from me, the producer, and then also just the voice, I guess, kind of for what Gen Z is within real estate. So we had a short go on to YouTube recently, and one of the things that was interesting to me was the response that we got out of our Gen Z viewers. We did get an overall consensus where it seemed like Gen Z isn't really looking at real estate in like the glass sense of being able to afford it, but being something that is a false hope. That's what it seems like so far and what our comment response has been.
Yeah, the comments were brutal.
They were.
Yeah, they were brutal. So should we give some context?
We can give some context, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a short about how I was talking about how my daughter, who, just for point of reference, she's 15, and how I believe that when she goes to buy a home, she will probably transact very differently than we do now, and she'll want to do a lot of things online. She'll want to do a lot of things by herself. And we were kind of like talking about how AI may play a real big component in that. And the comments that we got were by and large like, lady, you're kidding yourself. Your daughter will never be able to buy a home. Like, that's a joke. And just kind of a lot of that.
It was a lot of that. And I would say like people are kind of looking at it through like a cynical aspect, because I do believe at the end of the day, every generation is going to be able to afford housing, but there are struggles that come along with it. Hey, this is Colby from the future here doing a quick editor's note because I feel like I didn't do a good enough job at articulating what I wanted to say. At this point here in the conversation, I do come up with the topic as though that I think that Gen Z is a little cynical for what the future might hold for home ownership, but it is very much so within reason. I do believe there will be a point in which that we'll be able to acquire housing, but at the same time too, with the way that our market currently exists in, and then just economically where we're at, it is very much so within reason for us to be very cynical about this here, because it is pretty bleak. And I do think that for a lot of people out there, this is something that is very much systemic, and that we really don't have much of a choice to really fight in outside of just time. Time will come, and it sucks that we have to deal with that. But just wanted to go ahead and throw this in there before the conversation continues on, because I feel like this probably clears up a bit more of what I'm trying to say here. Again, I do believe at some point we will be able to acquire homeownership, but at the same time too, it's very much so within reason for us to be cynical, whether it's systemic or whether it's just current market conditions. And like that what we have available is that our generation is the most online that it's been for a generation to purchase a home. Millennials definitely were that way seen in the past, but as it is right now, one of the things that I do think of is that Gen Z is in the focus of when it comes to the aspect of economic topics. It just seems that the blame gets passed on. It seems like it's kind of moving between generations right now at that point.
So, okay, wait, let's go back to what you just said, because I think you said something pretty powerful. You said Gen Z is the first generation. Like, I call them like iPad and the crib babies. Like, you guys grew up with your tablets, you grew up online, you grew up with YouTube. And so you're the most digitally native generation that is coming to, or is in home buying age, right? The upper end of Gen Z is definitely in home buying age. So how do you think that that impacts the sentiment around buying a home?
So, yeah, no, like you're saying, we did grow up in a time where and I've talked about it before with my friends, where we saw the aspects of both sides of life, where it was prior to the internet and then post-internet. And the thing is that growing up, we have seen the tremendous growth of what platforms have been able to be grown off of what it is to live in a world of like technology. And the thing is that what I think with our generation is that we get locked into the aspect of the worst when it comes to the internet with it. That's what I think.
So, well, because it's sensationalism and that's what kind of spreads into feeds.
Yep.
Is that why?
I think so. And that's just like how it goes with algorithms and whatnot when it comes to how things like will stick to a person's feet and like on a brain, because people will be more inclined to react to something that's like that. That's what I think.
So, but there is, the reality is economically, these are really interesting times, and, somewhat kind of depressing for the home buyers, especially first time home buyers.
Yep.
And so let's unpack that.
Yep. So one thing I wanted to cover here, just as an overall sentiment for how we felt as it was going to go for the beginning of this year for 2024, there was a lot of predictions on how this would be kind of like what would have been the year of relief almost. There was the idea that because the election's coming up, that the feds might be more inclined to go ahead and decrease the rates a little bit. Inventory would be growing. And then inflation was expecting to go ahead and settle down.
Right.
Obviously, we know things haven't been actually panning out that way. We know, for one, that inventory, while it has been growing, doesn't mean that in terms of not availability, but in terms of the overall price, to be able to acquire one, it's still pretty high. And then inflation is still hitting at its marks just because we have, obviously, the aspects of wars going on throughout the world right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of money being printed, right?
Yep.
And, or there was, maybe it's come to a somewhat of a decrease. But Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, came out today and they did not do anything with rates. So they left rates the same.
Yep.
They did say that they were going to ease the selling of the balance sheets. So that's good. But you're absolutely right. Rates aren't coming down. And everybody thought because it's an election year, it's going to happen. And Jerome Powell was asked that today in the press conference. And he's like, look, we are not making decisions based on politics. We're making decisions based on inflation and targets and the data. And I thought that was really interesting. And he actually referenced, look, I think he said 4 election cycles he's been the Fed chair, which I was surprised at that. I didn't realize it was that many. I didn't think it was that many, but I believe that's what he said. Don't quote me. But in any event, he said that we don't factor in the election at all into our decisions. Now, do I believe that? I don't know if I believe that to be real. But we all were expecting rate cuts. They haven't happened. It is now May 1.
Yep, May 1st, and still not much improvement on that front there. And I think that people are just looking for a way to try to like uplift themselves, where it's like, we're in the tough times right now, but like the expectation is that like it can't last forever. But realistically, like how long do you think that we could end up sitting in this way right here?
I think until things get better. I think that their key motivator is inflation. Mm-hmm. And as inflation remains high, employment remains really high as well. And as long as those two indicators remain high and steady, we're probably not going to see a rate cut. And hopefully we don't see a rate hike.
Hopefully. And that's everyone's fear right now. And I feel as though that, at least like for my generation, I think the interest rate number is really the biggest thing that people look towards. Because what I think is that people look at interest rates for like housing as they do the same thing for credit cards. Since a lot of our generation is unfortunately within credit card debt or any type of like student loan debt, a lot of it is thought that way. So people think that it's the end all be all, that the interest rate will be the biggest thing. There'll be a hindrance for it. And I don't think that they get enough idea that that's not the only thing. That's not the only thing with it.
It's not. But the unfortunate thing is we do have relatively high interest rates. They're near 20-year highs. And then we also have high home prices.
Yep.
And so when you couple the two, it does make for a very challenging entry into the housing market. But there are ways that you can still become a homeowner. There are ways that you can still buy. Maybe we'll talk about those in a few minutes. But the reality is it is a challenging time. And we get that, like, very real. It's a very real concern.
It is. And to give an idea for inflation numbers here, and this is something that we've probably covered before on one of our previous podcasts here, but just to give an idea, I've had discussions with some friends here before around my age, just talking about when it comes to the idea of affordability within housing. And one conversation that comes up when I've also talked to some of my family and whatnot, when it's affordability wise, a lot of the time the discussions come into play where it's that, hey, while you guys probably can't like afford a house currently, and that's fine, like you're young enough in age where you're not going to be able to like afford one initially. And like you were saying earlier that there's got to be some patience with it, which is what I understand. But just to give an idea for numbers, to back this up here, in 2024, the average household salary needed to acquire a home, so within a household, it could be like you and a partner, it rose to $110,000, $871 to be exact, actually. It was a nearly 50% increase from 2020 when the average amount was $76,191. So we all know that like Fed's printing money, like obviously is going to end up causing like a huge amount of inflation when it comes to that there. But that's a nearly 50% increase. To give an idea when it comes to the wages aspect of it within that time, there's only been a 23% increase between Q4 2019 to November of 2023.
So affordability so the amount that you need to make to buy a home has went up by 50%, but wages have only grown by 24%.
Yep.
Is that the takeaway?
It. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not on par. Nowhere close. And what happened in 2020 was really I believe a once in a generational event. And the interest rates that we saw during 2020, 2021, beginning of 2022, we will probably, I don't believe I will see those rates again in my lifetime. That's my sentiment. I don't believe I will.
Yep. And I think people get hung up on that too. They see that like, oh, those are some golden numbers right there. Like that was the golden time to either refinance, or if somehow you're able to purchase a house, but during that time it was still difficult to, that's what people imagine being like the golden price.
Oh yeah. And people wear it like a badge too. Like, oh, I have a 1.975% interest rate, right? Like they love to tell you how low they locked in their rate at. But the reality is even for those individuals, they have this amazing rate, but guess what? They are stuck in that house.
Yep.
And they're likely not going to move. If they do move, they're going to probably find a way to creatively hang on to that rate because it's just an asset at this point. And it leaves the younger generation going like, what's our entry into the housing market?
Yep. And that's the tough part there, that everyone's been like trying to figure out like what is the entryway to it. And only time will tell, really. Like, in terms of what I think personally, I don't see it like being, depending on like what your circumstance is, depending on where you live, and also like where your job is. It's not going to be too soon. At least the way it feels like for me personally. I don't know if there's like a way that you think about it, whether like there are going to be ways for us to afford, whether it's just us purchasing with friends and whatnot. But it just seems like the overall sentiment is that like, it doesn't seem like it's happening soon.
You really have to reimagine what becoming a homeowner looks like.
Yep.
And the ways that you can get there may look differently than it did for your parents. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned this earlier, but patience is key.
Yep.
And I think that just from my perspective, one thing about your generation is I think that you guys have a hard time delaying gratification.
Yep.
Because you're used to getting everything when you want it exactly that moment, right? And like, I can remember being younger, and I remember there was this thing on TV that I wanted when I was like 10, and I had to like fill out a card and like mail it back with a check, and then wait like 8 to 12 weeks for that thing to arrive, and it just like took forever. And by the time it came, I totally forgot about it, right? Like it was totally outside of my mind. But now you have everything at your fingertips, and you can have everything you want like instantly.
It is the TikTok effect that really has like unfortunately hit people. And it's not even with just that though, but purchasing anything too, like Amazon, the quick 2-day delivery service with Prime, or even same day too, depending on how it is. A lot of people in my generation are just so accustomed to that aspect of it that delayed gratification is something that needs to be learned, and it's not something that can be like taught necessarily. Like you have to go through it yourself. But it'll happen at some point, I believe.
It will. And then reimagining what buying a home looks like. I mean, you mentioned it already, buying a home with friends. That is gaining a ton of traction. And there are realtors that are out there that actually that's what they're specializing in. They're saying like, hey, we specialize in helping first-time home buyers buy houses with friends. And I think that that's kind of cool that niche exists, because there's a whole slew of things that come up when you think about, am I going to buy a house with a friend? Well, I'm going to have to really like set some good boundaries, and we're going to have to like really treat this as a business. But that's a really great way for you to get into the housing market. and catch the appreciation, because the reality is prices continue to go up. I believe that recent reports came out, and nationally we did have an increase in home prices. Nationally, it was very, very low. I think the slowest increase in like over, a year or something, but it was still an increase. So we still have prices going up, and interest rates aren't coming down. And so how can you use that to your benefit? Well, one of the ways could be is, hey, maybe you and Fabian go in on a place, right? And decide that you're going to keep it for 4 years. And after 4 years, you're going to sell it. Or you come up with a game plan now and provisions for how you can restructure that down the line if you both mutually agree to. It can be done.
Yep. And I think being creative is the thing that really will open up people's mind when it comes to that. Because you can always live in an apartment. I feel like most of the time, like that's how it is like for my friends. Either that or they'll be renting out a house from their parents. I know like a few friends that will do that. Mm-hmm. But to come together and to like purchase like a home like as a unit, I think it's an aspect I think maybe more people need to look into. But obviously, it depends on like income and whether or not they're going to be responsible enough to go ahead and like to do that. I think responsibility is probably the biggest thing when it comes to learning that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. So like as I say that, and as you think through that for yourself, would that be your biggest concern, is that you would buy a home with somebody who wasn't responsible and couldn't, keep up their fair share?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me that's the case. I do just see like situations that'll play out. I think I remember you saying at one point that Kyan, that he was on Reddit, and there's like horror stories of landlords that will go through and their tenants will have just like stories on either being friends and whatnot, that sometimes it just doesn't work out for them. I think that's the biggest thing. Responsibility is like one thing, but then whether or not that like you can really trust the person for 4 years, because 4 years, while it doesn't seem like it's long, as you get older, you realize that like time does pass and like people will change in that period, and it could affect how like things initially started.
Yeah, especially if your frontal lobe is still developing.
Yep. If you're still like up until 25, like you're still developing as I think a man.
Yeah, I think so too. So you're absolutely right. People change, and it's a long time and definitely a commitment. But with the right individuals, I think it could be pulled off pretty effectively.
Yep.
And there's other options too, right? So there's grant programs, mm-hmm. and Arizona just introduced a new grant program where they're offering down payment assistance. So that's also something that can be looked into. And then there's different types of loans. Like we were talking about this offline, like there's vacation rental loans, right? So maybe you don't invest in a home that you live in, but maybe you get a vacation home and catch the appreciation on that. Because with the vacation home, the difference is that if you get a mortgage on it, it's not underwritten based on your income. It's underwritten based on the income potential of the property. And so you would still need a chunk to get into it, but the benefit for anybody that may not have the income to qualify for a mortgage in the conforming sense is that they could get into a vacation rental without having that constraint on them. So that's another interesting angle too. There are so many ways. Like if it's something that you're interested in doing, it is a worthy pursuit, and don't give up on it, right? Because you can get there. It may not be tomorrow. It might not be 6 months from now, but maybe 18 months from now. And believe it or not, that goes by really fast.
It does. I will say personally, time does move by a lot faster than you realize, and it can work out. So I have one other topic that kind of goes inside with it here, but it's not something that I think that we've necessarily talked about recently. But one thing that I think that goes inside the lines of when it comes to purchasing a home, a lot of the time it depends on like, for one, the condition in which like you're going to be settling down if you have a partner and if you're looking to have a family. One of the things that goes inside with it is obviously like having kids. And so one of the things that's popped up recently, it came out from the CDC. I don't remember how long ago it was. It was just recently. But overall birth rates have been declining over this past year or so. In the U.S., it came down an overall of 2%. And then between the ages of 15 to 44, it was overall 3% here. What does it have to do to really go inside within housing? I think what really kind of piles up with it is that people are wanting to settle down. And if they are more inclined to do that, they're also more inclined to go ahead and have a house. And so I think that the overall stress that comes with it, and what I've talked about with some other people, is that they're not looking to have kids recently or anytime soon because of what the overall aspect is right now.
So, okay, let me rephrase that and make sure I'm understanding.
Yep.
Are you saying that you think that maybe your generation is holding off on getting married, having children because they can't get into houses?
That's what I think so.
Okay.
I think it's that the part of it that I think that really like hits people is that they want to be able to achieve these things. And I think in the aspect of how it was for like our parents growing up, and I know it's not right to really compare generations. That's not something that like can really be comparable. But growing up, like with my family specifically, my parents were able to afford a house before I was born. They purchased that, and then they had me. And then from there, like the process of which like that you have for a regular suburban family continued on. But I think people are hesitant on that because it's the stress of everything else that goes with it. My dad was 27 when he had me. I'm 3 years apart from that. I can't imagine within 3 years of me being able to have a house and then also a little kid too running around. That's something that like I
little Colby.
a little Colby running around. That's not something I think that'll happen within like the immediate future. But it's just because I think that those numbers do go inside together right there, because people that are my generation they're overall just stressed out. They want to be able to have these things here, but it's not something that's obtainable. It seems like a dream still.
Well, before I bought my first house, that felt like a dream too, right? And I think that, obviously times were different then. And I was a dual income first-time home buyer, so Jason and I both had income, which definitely helped. It wasn't just me trying to buy it. I wouldn't have qualified on my own. Yep. He wouldn't have qualified on his own. The only way we were able to do that was together. But I think you're onto something with the declining birth rate and household formation. I definitely think you're onto something, and no doubt have so much empathy for your generation, because it is tough. It really is. There is kind of something, though, that you all really need to consider, you Gen Zers, and that is the great wealth transfer. There will be a massive amount of wealth that is transferred from baby boomers down. It's estimated to be about $4 trillion inherited by baby boomers, 30 trillion into Gen X, 27 trillion into millennials. That is going to have an impact on your generation as well. So a ton of cash is coming down.
Did not know that, actually.
Yeah, it's like it's going to be considered the largest wealth transfer in history. So it's a lot of money coming down because baby boomers are getting older and they're going to start passing away, sadly, right? And leaving that money to their heirs.
And that includes like housing assets too,
Absolutely.
like within that number too. So
yeah, it's a lot of things. It's housing, it's cash, it's businesses. So a lot of items of value will be transferring, and that will definitely have its impact.
So as we conclude here, one thing that I just want to go ahead and just get from you, Kayla, is what is it that you think will end up happening within the next few years, possibly when it comes to Gen Z and affordability? What advice do you have with it?
I think it's probably going to get a little worse before it gets better. And I do think we will see a little bit of a correction in the housing market. I do think that we likely will see some sort of, not big, I don't think we're going to see anything that's like massive as far as prices, but I do think that we may be a little overvalued in housing. And so we could see a little bit of a reprieve on house prices. I also believe that rates will settle back down. The 2s, the 3s, the 4s, I think that is la la land. I don't think we're going to see that again. And if we did, sadly, we'd probably be in some really tough economic times because they'd be doing that to spur economic activity, and that would likely be caused by something crazy. And so I don't necessarily think we want to see rates go back into the 2s and the 3s. I think it would be terrible. But I believe that we will land somewhere in maybe the high fives, low sixes. There will be programs introduced to spur first-time home buying activity specifically for you, for your generation. And I think those things, probably 24, 36 months, we will see some light at the end of the tunnel.
Gotcha. Is there any questions that you have as the Gen Z representative here?
Yeah. You had some notes for the podcast today, and I think we should talk about it because you were talking about birth rates. You were talking about kind of like household formations being delayed. And one of the things you mentioned is that Gen Z doesn't want to settle down because of economic instability. But then you also had a note in here that I think was pretty profound. While you're the most connected generation, they're also the loneliest. And that's like so sad.
It is.
So like, let's talk a little bit about that.
So as a perspective here, we all know that like currently when it comes into the dating world, we have the apps being like the main thing right now. In the past, we all know that we would either meet up in like school or meet up in social events or even at the grocery store too and whatnot. But I think currently with how it is with my generation and just knowing how it is with my friends and then also just my prior experiences before I got into a relationship, I feel like a lot of the time people are hooked into, and this kind of goes into how it is earlier, the instant gratification of dating. Because a lot of the time that goes into the swipe apps. You run out of swipes per like at a specific amount per day, and then that's your last connection you get of being able to date somebody probably for the day.
That's how it works?
It does. So
I've never been on a dating app, but you only get a certain amount of swipes?
Yep. And over the years too, they have like decreased it more and more because a lot of the time with the dating apps, they're not necessarily like the most profitable, in the way that they end up getting their profitability is either subscriptions. So either you'll pay like a certain amount per month and it's like egregious. It's almost like $40 or whatever a month or 25 or something like that. And then you still are limited by it. And so people are afraid to go in public to go ahead and start, asking around and whatnot. And I think that our generation is the most loneliest because we have the instant gratification of being able to try to get to somebody, but we never do at the end of the day.
That's like when I take my dogs for a walk and we go chase the bunnies, but I never let them catch the bunnies.
Yep.
I keep them on the leash, and like I do feel bad for them. Like, what would they do if they got a bunny? I don't even know what they would do. Yep. But that's so sad.
And it's been a trend for some years now. I don't have the specific numbers with it, but at least from my understanding of it here, people are they're locked into the aspect of being able to like find somebody on their phone because they're scared to go out and have that conversation with somebody. Of course, there's people out there that will have like Riz and whatnot. Like that's the biggest thing. But at the same time too, there's not like, I think a significant amount of people that actually do get like much turnover with that, which is why I think for one, birth rates have been declining. And then two, why people just haven't been dating. Inflation's for one thing. Whenever people want to take out like another person on a date, it's a lot more expensive. You go to a movie theater, tickets are like upwards of like $15 to $20 depending on like where you at, and whatever else you want to do, like bowling and whatnot. It costs a lot, and I think that's why that trend is like still going.
And that all goes back to inflation.
Yep.
And so I think that once we see inflation settle down and prices start to stabilize, wages increase modestly over time, interest rates come back down, maybe home prices come back down, there is hope. I really believe it. There is hope. It's just going to take a little bit of time to get there.
Yep. It'll take time there. And I think that and it doesn't seem like it's been that long for the world within technology, like it's really only been existing like as like a society for the last like would be 14 years now. 2010, I feel like, is the time where like people actually were really on social media and started adopting it, whether it was like purchasing like iPhones and finally like getting access to the internet more broadly. This ability that we have to connect online and the ability to be able to like see all this information, a lot of it is still relatively new. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is still just in its growing phases, even though it doesn't seem like it. AI, the way it is right now, it's not going to be the same way as it is like a year from now.
Oh, 100% agreed. Okay, I do have a final thought and question for you. Do you see a reversal? Do you see your generation and others giving up their connectivity?
I do actually. I think for one, and I had the perspective on this just because of what my interests are. A lot of people, and especially like in the generation that's in high school right now, a lot of people are into secondhand items. So whether it's like clothing, Depop is a huge thing.
Yeah, my daughter, that's it. That's all she talks about is Depop. Yeah,
yep.
Sorry.
No, and it's true. Like you are right. And the thing is that like it seems weird because in the past, a lot of the time people would be more inclined to go to the mall to meet up. Like that was a hangout space for everybody. Everybody would either go to like Zoomies, Tilly's, PacSun, and stuff that's like that. That's where everybody would hang out for clothes. But nowadays, it's transferred to the online aspect of like Depop, but then also thrift stores. And the reason why it kind of goes into why people might be disconnecting at that younger age from online to kind of just like regular T9 cell phones and whatnot is because I think people are looking at it in the lens of how it was like growing up with their family, because people thrift old clothes now because it reminds them of their past growing up. What I'm noticing is people are into more like digital cameras. They're into using iPods because it's cool to have a single device. And instead of like being like overwhelmed with your phone where you're getting notifications daily, you're getting instant gratification by going onto social media, you take things more slowly. And I think that's the reason why people might be more inclined. There's no data behind it, but I just see it with like my friends and then also my little cousins and whatnot. They're more on the aspect of wanting to be more conscious of what their time is. And then also the aspect of not needing like a cell phone for everything.
I think you're onto something. I know my son, he's 19 and he does not have social media apps. He did for a bit. He deleted all of them. He's hardly ever on his phone. And I definitely see that kind of reversal and maybe giving up a little bit of the digital world so that he can engage more in the present world.
Yep. And I think that it's, while we see it like as a trend right now, it might reverse. Like there's always things that'll like pop in and out. But I do think that people of like my generation are starting to realize now that we've grown up with like this period of time where like technology has been like the biggest thing in the world, that they're realizing that, you know, it's not great. Like we have social media apps that are like begging for our attention. We check our screen time and we see that TikTok's on for like 3 hours within your screen time in a day, or whatever app that it is. We're starting to realize that we're more conscious of that there, and it'll probably take more time for it.
Yeah, I agree. I think you told me a while back you deleted your TikTok.
Yep, no, I deleted it, but then I re-downloaded it because
So it lives on your phone now.
It lives on my phone, and it's out of convenience because I will say I'll get like TikToks from Fabian or like my friends or my girlfriend where they'll be like, "Can you respond to me? I sent you like 6 TikToks. I need you to look at it."
Oh, that's so funny. Oh my goodness. It is very addicting.
It is indeed. But I think that things will change. And I think that's how it goes with how the housing industry is right now. We wanted to give you guys this episode today just to give you the idea and the perspective of what it's like for somebody that's in the Gen Z generation to really think about housing and affordability. We didn't get into the aspect of like renting, but I think the big thing is that people want to be able to own a tangible item like a house. It's something that's going to be an asset, and it's going to be something that's going to grow through the years that you're alive. And it's a focus point. It's a goal that everyone has, I believe. And so I appreciate you for having me on, Kayla. I appreciate for letting me rant today.
I love it. Thanks, Colby. This was fun.
Yep. Just want to let you guys know, if you guys are interested in having more discussions like this, if you want to see some more perspectives from other people here within Zoodealio, if you guys could please like, comment, and subscribe. If you guys stay till the end of the video, if you say Colby has a mullet, then hey, we know that you paid attention to the end. But appreciate you guys. Catch you guys later. Take care.